Let me be direct with you about what happened in Cleveland, because I think it deserves a real conversation, not just noise. Dillon Gabriel walked into Brown's minicamp and walked out as the story nobody wanted to write, but everyone knew was coming. And I am not talking about a rough day or an off practice or one of those moments where you chalk it up to timing. I am talking about a systematic, undeniable, in front of everyone collapse that raised a very serious question about whether Gabriel belongs in this competition at all. That question is no longer rhetorical. Here is what I saw, and here is why it matters more than people are willing to admit right now. When Shedeur Sanders arrived at that practice field, he did not announce himself. He did not need to. The coaching staff under Todd Monken had already made a quiet, organizational decision about where the reps were going, and they went to Shedeur. First team offense. Starting unit. Real reads, real pressure, real accountability. Meanwhile, Gabriel was getting his work in with the second team, which in NFL terms is the roster's way of saying, we already know what we think about you, but we will let you show us something anyway, and Gabriel showed them something, just not what he needed to show. When the 7-on-7 period finally arrived and Gabriel got meaningful reps, the numbers were brutal. 3 completions, 6 attempts, 2 interceptions. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because those numbers are not just bad. They are the kind of numbers that end conversations before they really start. In a brief session designed to evaluate decision-making, rhythm, and ball placement, Gabriel completed exactly half his throws and gave the defense 2 free possessions. That is not a competitive performance. That is a resume for a backup role that he might not even be able to hold on to. What made it worse was not just the numbers, though. It was the way it happened. I watched the film, and there is a specific rep that I keep coming back to. Gabriel puts a man in motion, does everything right pre-snap, scans left, scans right, and then the moment of truth arrives. He steps into the throw, and the ball just dies. It does not zip. It does not cut through the air with any kind of authority. It waffles out toward the receiver like a quarterback whose arm and brain are not communicating anymore. And before that ball even has a chance to apologize for its own existence, a defender reaches up and snatches it. Clean, emphatic, final. That was not a great defensive play. That was a quarterback whose body told the truth in real time. You can fake a lot of things in football. You can fake confidence in your footwork. You can fake composure when a reporter shoves a microphone in your face. You can talk your way through a press conference and make everything sound reasonable and measured and professional, but you cannot fake arm strength. You cannot fake the split-second conviction it takes to deliver a ball into a tight window with the kind of velocity that makes a defender think twice before jumping the route. Gabriel stood on that field, and the game stripped him bare in front of everyone. His mechanics said one thing. His footwork said another. And neither of them said anything that resembled starting quarterback at the NFL level. Then came the 11-on-11 reps, which were supposed to be his reset moment. Every athlete in a competition like this carries a mental running scorecard. They know when they need a play. They know when they need a moment to point to and say, that is me. That is what I bring. That is why I am here. Gabriel had that opportunity in full. A real offense around him. Real route runners. Real defensive coverage. A genuine chance to deliver a single convincing throw and put some doubt back into the conversation. And he ended that session getting intercepted by a player on a tryout. Not a starter, not a veteran cornerback with 10 years of film on quarterbacks. A tryout player, a guy who drove to that facility with a dream and a prayer and a suitcase, and left with the most embarrassing interception of Dillon Gabriel's young professional career. That moment matters beyond the stat line. In NFL evaluation culture, context is everything. Getting picked off by a first-round cornerback in a tight coverage situation is football. Getting picked off by a tryout player on a route that should have been a routine completion. That follows you. That gets talked about in meeting rooms. That is the kind of moment coaches replay in slow motion when they are deciding who gets reps and who gets released. Gabriel handed that player a career story, and in doing so, wrote a very uncomfortable chapter in his own. And then came the press conferences, and honestly, this is where I stopped being surprised and started being genuinely frustrated on behalf of every person in Cleveland who has invested any emotional energy into this situation. Gabriel got asked a straightforward question. Where did you spend your off-season? It is a layup. It is an open invitation to talk about your preparation, your film work, your conversations with the coaching staff, your physical conditioning, anything that signals you took the months between last season and right now with the seriousness that a quarterback competition demands. His answer? I was places. I want you to understand how that sounds to me. Not as a casual fan, but as someone who studies how quarterbacks carry themselves when the pressure is real and the cameras are rolling. I was places. That is not humility. That is not understated professionalism. That is a man who either genuinely does not grasp the gravity of his situation or has decided, consciously or not, that this competition is not something he needs to fight for with everything he has. Either interpretation is damning, and I am not sure which one is worse. Compare that to Shedeur Sanders. When Shedeur talks about his off-season, he does not wave it away with vague geography. He gets specific. He talks about what he worked on. He talks about the film sessions and the mechanical adjustments and the conversations he had with coaches about what the new system demands from the quarterback position. He talks about it with the energy of a man who spent those months obsessing over the opportunity in front of him, not sightseeing his way through it. That gap in how these two men talk about preparation is not a small thing. It is a window into everything. When Gabriel got pressed on the playbook, the answer got worse. He started talking about similarities in concepts and how everyone has their own way of progressing through plays and thinking through things differently. He said it was day one, and that learning would continue as days keep coming. That is 30 seconds of words that add up to absolutely nothing. And I know what real preparation sounds like when a quarterback is asked about a new offense. I know what it sounds like when a guy has spent 3 months living inside a playbook and actually has opinions about what he is learning. Gabriel had no opinions. He had filler. He had the verbal equivalent of a waffled throw. Technically structured, totally empty, and immediately forgettable. Here is the part of this story that I think gets buried under the surface-level performance analysis, and I think it needs to be said plainly. Last season was not just bad for Gabriel in terms of on-field production. Last season was bad in a specific directional way that involved another quarterback on the same roster being managed out of opportunities. Shedeur Sanders came into that building as a first-round pick with real talent and real potential, and spent the better part of the year watching his development get throttled by a coaching staff that had already decided the narrative before the reps were even distributed. The system around him was not designed to let him grow. It was designed to contain him, and Dillon Gabriel was in that building the entire time. He watched it happen. He benefited from the way reps were allocated and narratives were managed. He collected the advantages of a staff that had an agenda without ever once standing up in front of a camera or a reporter and saying, "This is not a fair competition and everyone in this facility knows it." He was silent. And silence in that context is not neutral. Silence when another quarterback is being systematically limited is participation. It is consent. It is choosing your own position in the depth chart over someone else's right to a legitimate evaluation. I am not saying Gabriel designed that situation. I am not saying he walked into Stefanski's office and drew up a plan to keep Shedeur down. But I am saying that he moved through that season as a quiet beneficiary of something that was fundamentally unfair, and then walked into this minicamp talking about familiar faces and new routines, like the slate is clean and the history does not exist. That posture does not sit right with me. The accountability he refuses to voice in pressers is going to keep finding him on the football field, one waffled throw at a time. Todd Monken is a different animal than Kevin Stefanski, and I think Gabriel has not fully processed what that means for his standing in this building. Stefanski ran an operation that had room for politics and agendas and quiet favoritism. Monken runs an operation centered on one question: who gives us the best chance to win? That question does not have a political answer. It does not have a loyalty answer. It has a film answer, and the film from day one of minicamp gave a very clear response. One quarterback commanded the first-team offense with the poise and confidence of a player who has already solved the hardest parts of this system. The other one completed half his throws and got picked off by a player who might not make the roster. The contrast between Gabriel and Shedeur during those practices was not subtle. It was cinematic in the worst way for Gabriel, because cinema requires a protagonist and a scene stealer, and Shedeur stole every single scene without even seeming to try. While Gabriel was fighting his own mechanics and his own decision-making and his own uncertainty, Shedeur was just operating, moving the offense, making the right reads, delivering the ball with the kind of clean, decisive authority that defensive backs have nightmares about. He made the first-team offense look like it had been running his system for years, and it has been running for exactly as long as he has been in the building. That is what natural command looks like. That is what happens when talent and preparation and urgency collide at the same moment in the same place. Shedeur showed up to that mini-camp having done the work, knowing the system, ready to perform, and the performance reflected every hour he invested in getting there. Gabriel showed up having been places, having thought through plays differently, having learned about familiar faces and new routines, and the gap between those two preparation philosophies was not measured in stats alone. It was measured in the entire atmosphere of that practice field, in which quarterback the coaching staff trusted with their best offensive personnel, and in which quarterback a tryout player picked off on his final throw of the session. I keep coming back to that image, the waffled throw. The ball floating out there with no conviction behind it, no velocity, no intent. And a defender who has not even earned a roster spot yet, reaching up and ending the rep with a clean interception like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because in that moment, it was natural. It was the natural result of an off-season spent somewhere other than a film room. It was the natural result of a quarterback who assumed that proximity to the starting job was the same thing as earning it. It was the natural result of a competition that, despite what any official team statement says, has already been decided by the men who watch film for a living and know exactly what they are looking at. The Cleveland Browns do not need to hold a press conference to announce a starting quarterback. The practice field already announced it. The rep distribution announced it. The way coaches respond to plays in real time announces it more honestly than any formal statement ever could. And everything that practice field announced pointed in one direction, toward Shedeur Sanders, toward the quarterback who spent his off-season preparing instead of traveling, who showed up knowing the offense instead of learning what similarities it shares with the last one, who commanded the ones instead of struggling through the sevens. What makes this whole situation carry so much weight is not just the competition itself, it is what the competition represents. Shedeur Sanders was drafted into a situation that was already compromised. He walked into a building that was not built for him to succeed, and spent an entire season watching his development get managed down instead of lifted up. He survived that. He worked through it. He got to the other side of a coaching change and a system reset, and showed up to the very first evaluation opportunity of the new era, ready to remind everyone exactly why he was selected where he was selected. That kind of resilience does not get praised loudly enough. And Gabriel, whatever his individual qualities and whatever sympathy his situation might deserve in isolation, represents the continuation of an old way of doing things that Monken is clearly done tolerating. Gabriel represents the politics, the quiet beneficiary culture, the managed competition that was never really a competition. Monken's entire approach is built on the opposite of that. It is built on open evaluation, performance-based decisions, and the simple principle that the best quarterback plays. And by every available measure from day one of mini-camp, the best quarterback in that building is not the one who was places this offseason. Cleveland has been waiting for something real at the quarterback position for longer than any fan base should have to wait. They have watched the carousel spin and the experiments fail and the half measures accumulate into nothing. And now they have a young quarterback standing in front of them who has every physical and mental tool required to be the answer to all of that frustration, who has already demonstrated under actual practice conditions that he is the most capable player in this competition, and who carries himself with the kind of quiet, unshakable belief that you genuinely cannot manufacture through coaching or scheme or favorable rep distribution. Shedeur Sanders does not need the politics to go his way. He does not need the reps to be unfairly managed in his direction. He does not need favors or agendas or quiet assistance from a staff with a predetermined outcome. He just needs a fair field and a real evaluation, and when he gets those two things, the result is exactly what we saw at minicamp. He runs the ones, he controls the tempo, he makes the throws that matter, and the quarterback across from him, the one who spent his offseason places and showed up talking in circles about playbook similarities, goes 3 for 6 with 2 interceptions and hands his last rep to a tryout player on a silver platter. The starting job in Cleveland belongs to Shedeur Sanders. The film says it, the coach's eyes say it, the rep distribution says it, and somewhere deep down, in whatever honest corner of his mind, Dillon Gabriel allows himself to visit when the cameras are off and the press conference answers have all been delivered and the day is finally over. I think Gabriel knows it too.